This guy got his shoes off.
I literally, that is...
Nick has his shoe off now, pointing out his pinky toe knuckle.
Ready to dive deeper into your spiritual journey? Join Dave Drum and Ben Garcia as they explore the raw, honest, and nuanced experiences of modern spiritual men. Here is something to chew on.
So, did you have a nice break?
Yeah.
Now we're back for episode 3.
Episode 3, man. Yeah, man. We took a little bit of time off. You actually kind of went on vacation, right?
I did go on vacation. We were out in Texas for a week.
Texas, that's kind of...
Bounced around Dallas, Fort Worth, Waco, like the whole, that's a small chunk of Texas because it's huge, but the whole area.
Texas is huge.
That's
So Texas is like in that area is kind of like the Bible Belt, right? It's part of the Bible Belt.
Yeah. Definitely. There are a lot of really big churches there.
Really big churches. So there's some really big Christians, so to speak.
I guess it depends on their diet, really.
Right. Everything's bigger in Texas.
They like to say that.
Right.
There are some aspects I would agree. So a lot of churches, and you see these big churches. Now it's interesting because here in Florida, like we've got kind of a sprawling campus. Where we've got different buildings and we've got a park and we've got stuff like that. But one of the interesting things is kind of like up north, all of that needs to be inside because of the crazy weather that they get.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's 110 in the summer, but it's 20 in the winter with 40-mile-an-hour winds.
Right.
And at any time, depending upon who you talk to, you get golf ball-sized hail. So they put a lot of stuff inside. So from the outside, it looks like this huge church, but it's really because they're putting it all inside,
kind of sectioned off,
so you don't die.
Right. So, I guess it kind of leads into the topic of today is like we were talking about church and Christian. What is a Christian? You know, and in our research for doing this back and forth, you kind of landed on a really cool quote about what a Christian is.
Well, it is the best argument for Christianity.
Yeah.
Is also the worst argument for Christianity.
Which is?
The people.
The people, yes.
The people.
Absolutely.
Because the best thing about our church that we go to is definitely the people, the relationships we have. And we've just done 2 episodes about friendships and about maintaining relationships through disagreement. So definitely the best part is the people.
Right.
But the worst part is always the people, man.
You're thinking about somebody right now. Stop that.
They're very people-y.
Yeah, people, we as people kind of gravitate to similar-minded people, and we kind of create little sects within the church of, we have our friends that maybe we go out to dinner with after, or we don't talk to the people over there, not because
those are first service people.
Right.
Get out, you're clogging up the parking lot.
You guys go on Saturday nights, that's like blasphemy, right?
No, it's joyful.
But that's, I think, and with anything in life, you gravitate towards people that are similar to you, like-minded. There's like a study about that where, like, even where you move and where you live is kind of, you just naturally, what it is, like red state, blue state, however that, people that think along your lines, you end up gravitating towards them. And that can actually be a detriment to your spiritual growth, right?
Yeah, I think so. And, the quote you were talking about, I'll read this because, I don't think I do it justice to paraphrase it.
Right.
But so it says the best argument for Christianity is Christians, their joy, their certainty, their completeness. But the strongest argument against Christianity is also Christians. When they are somber and joyless, when they are self-righteous and smug in complacent consecration, when they are narrow and repressive, then Christianity dies 1,000 deaths.
Wow.
That's
1,000 deaths.
1,000 deaths. But of all the things he lists, and if you're a nerd like me, that's Sheldon Van Euken. And in my mind, I was going to say, oh, he an author in the 1900s, theologian. But as my teenage daughter pointed out, like the 90s were the
1900s.
1900s. So
You were born in the 1900s?
speaking of things that died 1,000 deaths, that was me in that moment. But anyways, it's when they're somber and joyless.
Yeah.
And when you think about that idea of being joyless, it's like, because we talk about Christianity, it's like, oh, it doesn't exempt you from pain. It doesn't exempt you from struggling. It doesn't guarantee you're going to be happy. Happy's an emotion.
Right.
Joy is really a mindset. It's a place that you come from. Mm-hmm. And I think that idea of being joyless. I mean, joy itself is a fruit of the Spirit. Scripture tells us that when we have this presence of the Holy Spirit in us, we have joy. That's a gift that we're given. So when we're joyless, it really is that we're marked as somebody who shouldn't even claim the title.
Right. So, and I think about being joyless, and you can catch somebody in like a somber mood or something, but if their whole existence is that, like, they become that ritualistic or utilizing Christianity as a religion, like I'm thinking about the Pharisees and the 600 some odd rules and regulations that they had, and how much joy that could suck out of your life. Just trying to conform to this, put yourself in this box and you exist in here, and that's not really what we believe it to be, right? I mean, as a Christian, there's certain things that you can do that I can't do, and that's just our personality. That's not because I was told I couldn't do things, but
some of that because I'm double jointed, like in the.
I was thinking more like drinking beers and stuff like that. That's because of my past. My existence is different than yours. You know, and I would never say we're out to dinner or something. No, man, I really wish you wouldn't, because that's not something that I want to put on you. A burden I want to put on you. I've grown in it enough. And obviously there's parts in the Bible where Paul says, if you're doing something that hurts somebody else, don't do it, and maybe 10 years ago, I might not have that same respect for alcohol in general, for me.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of avenues we could go down.
Right.
Things that aren't listed as a sin.
Right.
But we feel the conviction that the Spirit said,
right.
Okay, it's not a sin, but for you,
maybe you shouldn't do that. Right.
So,
and I think that getting wrapped up in those actions, those lifestyles, those personal choices, you can look at that as joyless, or you can look at that as, by not doing that, I have this joy to not be subject to that, or however that looks. So
well, and I feel like, so here's, I guess, kind of the thought process is here we are on episode 3, and we've looked at relationships and we've looked at disagreements through the lens of Christianity.
Right.
And I know there's been some people who have been tracking with the podcast, or, watched some of the reels and the shorts on social media. And here's the thing. Some of these people are not what we would call Christians. Now, maybe you grew up in the church, and we have this perspective of what the church we grew up in, that's what all Christians look like, or maybe we didn't grow up in it
Yeah.
at all. I had a neighbor for a while whose daughter would play with my daughter, and one day my daughter mentions the Bible, and this girl says, "What's that?" And it caught me off guard, like,
Oh, wow.
she does. The topic of God is so far removed from her day-to-day life
Right.
that she doesn't even know what the Bible is. Now,
Wow.
granted, I think they were in probably 4th grade at the time,
Yeah.
so I'm sure she's cognitively aware of the concept of a Bible now,
Right.
but certainly not what's in it. So, all that to say, that's really what we're going to drill down on today is what is Christianity? What
We
is
believe Christianity is. Right.
fair enough?
I don't want to put ourselves in a box there by
Yeah.
saying that.
Because we're talking about something that's divine and perfect in our flawed human minds and our limited ability to wrap our heads around it. We're gonna get some things wrong. Our hope is that we don't get the big things wrong. Because frankly, if my mind can conceive every portion of who God is, it's not much of a God.
Right. He's not
Like,
very
if
big.
it can exist in here,
Right.
I'm not that creative. I would have never designed a platypus.
Right.
Like,
Right. That's good. That's good. So we'll get into like what a Christian is, and I got a pretty good definition from the great theologian Billy Graham, and when we come back, we'll hit on that definition.
I like it.
Something to chew on.
All right. So we're talking about this idea of, what it means to be a Christian,
Right.
and I think too often in today's world we use the same glossary and a different dictionary, meaning we use the
Interesting,
same
yeah.
words,
Yeah.
we all define them differently.
That's good.
And as a result, I think anytime you start drilling down to what is fill in the blank, you really start with the definition, how it was originally used, who used it, where do you find it.
Right.
And what's interesting is the word Christian never really appears in the Bible.
Never?
Never. So in the Bible, early followers are called brethren, they're called saints, followers of the way. They'll refer to in Acts, you see this, the way.
The way. This is the way.
And, they just proclaim themselves to be,
So they were all Mandalorians.
oh, jeez. They all just claim to be disciples of
Right.
Christ.
They're following a way, his
They're-
way.
His way. Now, the actual term itself, I'll get a little nerdy here. I mean, I have a tendency.
Yeah.
I may have a problem.
We're working through it.
Well, one of us is. And we'll let you decide who. So that term Christian actually comes from Greece, Christianos, meaning follower of Christ. And the thing, if you're not aware, Christ wasn't like Jesus's last name. Christ is a title from Christos. Christos is a Greek translation of the Hebrew word Messiah. So we'll talk a little bit more about why that term, why Messiah, Savior is important. But it's interesting is Greeks, I mean, I shudder to think that Americans do this, but Greeks would lump people together by who they followed,
Yeah.
so that they could almost dismiss them.
Right.
Like, he's a
Classify them.
He's a Trumper.
Yeah.
He's not a Trumper. He's a this. He's a that. I mean, we would never do this.
No,
we would
no,
never,
we're-
ever,
We've
never
grown
do this.
so much since then.
Yeah. Church people were different back then. Anyways, I digress. So, if you followed Nero Augustus, then you were an Augustinian. If you followed General Sulla, then you were a Sullanian. And so to be called a Christian was essentially like, hey, you're just a little Christ. You're just,
Yeah.
you're one of those people, you're a follower of the way, you're a little, so it was actually a very dismissive term.
Right.
And we see in 1 Peter, Peter tells, as he's writing this letter to the churches, he says like, hey, don't be ashamed of that term.
Right.
Like, Christ suffered for you, he died for you, he bore much worse. So the fact that you're lumped together with him,
Right.
don't take that as an insult.
Right. So you just said it doesn't appear anywhere in the Bible, and now you're referencing it in 1 Peter where it does appear?
So it's, again, it's
just asking
it's not a straight
For the people at home that are going to be
It is not
fact-checking.
a straight translation to the word Christian.
Okay. Because my Bible does say Christian in it. But again, I've said it before, translations are horrible.
Because they're trying to put it in words that we understand.
Right.
Because there aren't a lot of literal translations between Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic,
Right.
which is what the Bible's
English.
original text is. So
Stupid Americans.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I'm just waiting for somebody to come
Right.
out with the emoji Bible, because we've made it let's just go
Right.
back to hieroglyphics.
Right. So you gave us a really good, a really good nerdy definition. Well, at least a history of the word, where it comes from,
And to plant the flag that
Right.
Christian means you're a follower of Christ.
you're a follower of Christ, right? Which, I mean, like you said, some people at the time, they used it as a derogatory term, but we kind of look at that as a badge of honor now, you know?
Absolutely.
And it's become our way of life. It's become our identity, in many ways. I am a follower of Christ. I'm a child of God, and many of you know, like, one of the great theologians of our time was Billy Graham, the great, he in the 70s did the whole revival and
Would that be the mid-1900s when he was around?
yeah. So he had this really cool definition that I found. He said, a Christian is a person who is trusting Jesus Christ for their eternal salvation and is seeking to follow him in their daily life. To put it another way, a Christian is committed to Jesus as both their Savior and their Lord or Master. And I think that's really well written, as us, we look to Christ as an example. We follow him as our Savior. And one of the words I thought might kind of trigger some people is master or their Lord, because
we don't talk like that.
No, we don't. And nobody wants to be, I'm my own man, I'm my own boss, everybody's their own whatever.
Submission's a hard thing for guys especially.
Guys, and I think our culture today really leads us to believe we are the center of the universe, and
you mean the world's trying to pull us away from biblical thoughts and teachings?
it would appear that way. That's
strange.
weird.
I didn't know that was going to happen.
Right? But for us to be followers of Christ and use that as, you said, plant a flag, use that as our true north, so to speak. I think that leads itself to that joyful life we talked about, and it also leads us out of darkness. We talk about darkness to light and some of those other things. And you, knowing where the word comes from makes a lot of sense, or helps us to make sure we know what we're talking about. You use that glossary in different dictionaries, which is great. It makes me think of how many people don't know. You just referenced that little girl, whether she was 4, 5, 6, whatever, just had never heard of that. And how many people out there just, we talk about going on missions and we talk about making disciples, and whenever I think of that, I think of go to foreign country that doesn't speak English or broken, and they never had the opportunity, the gospel hasn't reached that part of the earth yet, you know, but there are so many people right here, it's hard. For me right now, thinking there's people in my neighborhood that don't know who Jesus is or have such a poor definition of what a Christian is that they have written it off completely.
Yeah, because, here's the thing, knowing that Jesus existed some 2,000 years ago and accepting his lordship over your life. Because we would both say, like, Jesus is Lord of your life.
Yes.
Whether you accept that or not
Right.
is the issue.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard people say, like, oh, I'm going to make Jesus Lord of my life. You don't make him anything.
Right.
He already is.
Right.
He exists there. Whether or not you accept his authority, whether or not you accept what he calls you to, that is on you. That's your role in this.
Yeah.
But to just say, like, oh, I believe in Jesus. Like, okay, I believe in the Pope too, in the sense that I believe there's a guy who holds that role in that place. Like, believing that Jesus existed doesn't make you a Christian. It means you've read some history books.
Yeah.
Because the most secular people out there will admit, yeah, this dude was alive. This dude was a teacher. I mean, there are, in the first century, there's some 25 to 30 sources that reference Jesus. Most of them are actually non-Christian, non-biblical, extra-biblical resources.
Right.
Like historical markers to say, this guy was here, this guy was crucified, this guy taught, this guy had followers. Like, there are all these historical markers. Virtually nobody is out there, even in other religions. Muslims are like, yeah, Jesus was a real man.
Well, you think about
that doesn't make you a Christian.
Right. I mean, even like our calendar, there's a line of demarcation from BC AD, or whether you want to say BCE, BC, whatever. There was something that marked out, like, we're in the year 2025 now. Where was year 0? That there's
guy.
An event happened there, and it just so happened to coincide with this guy. Anything before him was before Christ, or before common era. Yeah, you know. But I think that people that deny him as Lord of their life or whatever, they just glaze over that. You know, like, you don't even think about that because that's not associated with it. When you're learning the months of the year, and I just learned a fun fact about that. Did you know that July and August were added to the Gregorian calendar, which that's the calendar we all use now, because of Julius Caesar and Caesar Augustus wanted their name on
the calendar.
On the calendar. I just, fun fact, just learned that this week. But I think that's us humans trying to make ourselves immortal in some ways, leave a legacy. We've talked about leaving a legacy, but having enough authority in the world that, hey, we're going to make my month have 31 days.
Well, and it's funny. So there's a leadership, guru, modern guy. I believe it's Ken Blanchard. He was agnostic, which means, like, he wasn't an atheist. He didn't not believe, but he didn't believe. And his thing was, okay, looking at it from a leadership perspective, there's a guy who taught a way of life that has not just persisted for over 2,000 years, but has grown exponentially.
Yeah.
So he's like, well, let me look at this stuff strictly from through a leadership lens.
Right.
And as he approached that, good teaching. Okay, and what's funny is he's trying to look at it from this agnostic point of view, not even realizing how many biblical teachings are just absolutely, infiltrate every aspect of modern society, Western society, or at least nuggets of it sprinkled in there. And what he determined in the end is, without something else, without this divinity, there's no way that a first century Middle Eastern, uneducated, non-authoritarian person can start from scratch and leave such a long-lasting legacy. Right. There's no way without some sort of divine intervention. And that's the start of his Christian journey, is just the fact that he's like, there is just no other way to explain this other than God.
Yeah, I've seen other guys that start studying Christianity to almost try and prove it wrong, and end up becoming some of the most faith-filled people out there. It's just an interesting way that Jesus works in your heart. When you start really looking at it, and like you say, like realizing how much of everyday values and giving worth to other people, how that just stems from there, because we know in ancient Jewish times, ancient Middle Eastern times, people were possessions. There was slaves, women were possession, children were a burden, if they weren't a male, and
Right.
how through Jesus and his teachings that we've given value to those people, and it's taken a long time for people to come all the way around, but it all starts with him and his teaching and how we apply that into our lives.
Well, and so I guess my thought process is that we're not sitting here trying to give you guys a sales pitch.
No.
Like, oh no, you got to be a Christian. You got to be a Christian. I think to some degree, this episode has a lot to do with, like, for the non-Christian. Like, I would say this: if you and I are wrong, and there is nothing else after, what's it matter?
Right.
So
What did we lose?
what have we lost out on?
Right.
Nothing that we weren't willingly giving up anyways,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
But if we're right, then really there's nothing of greater importance than
Right.
what we're talking about.
An eternity without is way better than an eternity with.
So
What? Scratch that, reverse.
what are you wonking at? Play it back, reverse. So again, I think for, if this isn't something you've adhered to, if this isn't something that is a part of your life, then I would actually hope at the end of this that you would ask someone a question, that you would reach out, that you would find a local body, a local community, because again, the best part of church is the people.
The people.
And if you get there and you don't like those people,
There's something wrong with you.
find new people.
Find new people, yes.
But the other is, I think to some degree as well, if you do call yourself a Christian, even if you would call yourself, well, I'm not a practicing Christian, I don't go to church on the weekends,
Right.
but I still believe, like,
You're the 3-time-a-year guy.
maybe this is a chance to look at it and go, well, do I actually believe the things that I say I believe?
Right.
And if you are a practicing Christian, like, do the people around me believe that I believe these things?
Yes.
So, like, as we get into this, like, do a little self-evaluation. We've talked about that the last two episodes too. Like,
Do I believe what I say
and
I believe?
And is there evidence of it in my life?
Yeah. We had a great message this weekend about that specifically.
Yeah, it was great. Great.
It was kind of
Because, self-evaluation is always so
man,
much fun.
It really
when you're honest.
brings a lot of joy into your life when you think about it. No, the message was, I guess the title of the message was "Poser Christians."
Yeah,
right.
posers.
And
Posers.
it leads into what you were just talking about. Like, do I believe what I say I believe, and do I act like I believe that? And we were studying in 2 Timothy, and he listed these 18 things of, like, what was 19, whatever, things that, like, kind of define what a poser Christian is, or really it's...
And when you say, just to clarify, when you say poser Christian, someone who would bear the name
right.
without the actual evidence of.
Craig Groeschel wrote a book I'm going to say probably 10 years ago now. It was called Christian Atheist. And then the subtitle was Believing in God, but Living Like He Doesn't Exist. And I think that's a great definition of it right there. You believe in God, but your everyday actions, your everyday values, the way you interact with people does not reflect that belief, and that's how I would define that as well, and what ends up happening in those settings at church with that poser Christian, our immediate reaction is to take that Bible, that book, and make it a window, not a mirror. Oh, that guy. Yeah, I know you don't do that. You're
like a plank and a speck. And you see better.
But like you say, when you really...
Only some people got that.
When you own it and you look at those words, that disobedient, ungrateful, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, and you look inside, I think at some point or another, we can identify with every one of those statements. Maybe not continuously throughout your life, but if you really
we're all going to fall short.
Yes.
None of us are going to do any one of those perfectly. So when you're evaluating, you're going to go, yeah, today was tough.
Yes.
But what you're looking for in those self-evaluations is what's the common theme?
Right.
What's the one that I stumble over? What's the lowest hole in the bucket that the water leaks out of?
Right. And so for us, when we talk about those missing the mark, that's commonly referred to in the Bible as sin, right? And that's the best definition I've gotten is just like you're aiming for something and you miss it, you sin, and we get into that definition, that kind of goes along with Christianity, and that word can get used and abused just the same way, for a lot of different people about how they view what sin is and what the consequence of sin is and whether or not you can remove it from your life, or if you've done it, then it's with you forever, those type of sins, so to speak. And I think that using the Bible as, again, a mirror, not a window, and even, as you said, like people that are listening that aren't Christians and maybe they're really just hearing this maybe for the first time or maybe not explained this way, there's a lot of Proverbs and Psalms and just stories in the Bible that are great life lessons and teach us about what sin is, how to atone for sin, and who our ultimate Savior is.
So as we started piecing everybody sees our papers, started fleshing out our thoughts on this, one of the questions we asked ourselves, as a Christian, a lot of times I'm like, man, we just make this too hard.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
Simple, not easy.
Simple, not easy.
Right.
Always.
Right.
But we tend to overcomplicate it, or we feel like sometimes denominations or religions overcomplicate this, and it's just not that complicated. Love God, love people. The how is where so the question we asked ourselves was, is this a straightforward, cut and dry explanation, or is it nuanced and layered? Are there just a lot of different aspects? Well, yeah, we're supposed to love people, but what does that really look like?
Right.
And, in the book of Acts, it talks about the sharing of and having everything in common.
Who's my neighbor?
So is it socialism? Is it,
Socialism.
Well, I mean,
Right.
the common good is one of the threads of the first century church.
It is, man, and they sold their church. They sold all their stuff and
sold
brought
belongings and brought it to the church, so that we had it all in common, so that no one went without.
So socialism is biblical?
That is a whole episode all by itself, because if we want to go cut and dry
No.
statement.
No, so
No.
Can it be boiled down to just a few principles? Yeah, and
Go ahead.
I think it can, but I also think it's pretty nuanced, and I think that we can all live underneath an umbrella of Christianity, but that looks different for you than me in some aspects of your life. in other aspects, we're both going towards the same goal. You know, you might be a little bit further on in the inside lane of the track, and I'm a little more on the outside lane, or vice versa. You know, and maybe we crisscross as we're moving towards that goal.
That true north, mentality. Like if you're on that side of the table, I'm on this side of the table. If we're both heading towards this cup, then
a cup on the other side of a table.
Yeah.
For those that aren't watching.
Oh man. Yeah, we talked about that. So we are on opposite sides of the table.
Right.
We're coming from two different places, but we are heading to the same place on the table.
Right. And there's going to be different obstacles.
There's going to be different obstacles, but if we are both truly pursuing the same points, then we have no choice. Actually, we don't even have a choice in the matter. We will end up shoulder to shoulder at some point.
Yeah, that's good.
And that is, in my opinion, a marker of a true Christian community and true Christian faith. Like, man, I don't know your background. I don't know what's on your side of the table. And I don't have to pretend to know it. All I have to know is we have the same goal.
Yeah.
We're pursuing the same, life and lordship.
Yeah.
We're pursuing that same thing. So that, going back to last episode, actually makes unity so much easier in disagreement.
Right.
I could say like, no, clearly this is the path. We should walk this way. And you're like, bro, I can't even get there from here.
Right.
So so my concern is not, well, then you need to get over here. My concern is, well, okay, well,
how do I make that path come
how do I have a way to help you get there from here? Help me understand why that step, that phrase, help me understand. I want to understand why your side of the table is so much different than mine. And we can only adopt that mentality when we have a common goal.
Right. And that is kind of where we talked about like that joy-filled life or joyless life is when you can't you can't see the other person's path, or you believe that your path is the only one and this is the only way to get there. I'm not willing to look outside of, you got the blinders on and you're walking towards the goal, but you believe this is the only path that can lead to salvation. And putting yourself inside of a box, making yourself unaware of other possibilities, that turns into that religiosity, that turns into that behavior-based.
Behavior modification.
Right.
Do this whether you want to or not.
Right.
Obligatory service, obligatory actions, regardless of heart change.
Yeah. Making it an obligation, I think, is it's one of the hardest things. If
we just go back and look at what Jesus did in the time he lived in, what his actions were, he dropped into a time and a place with the people, with the Jews. They didn't really need more laws and regulations.
No.
They had added to them over centuries.
Have you ever seen the guy that tried to do like all the 600 and some?
No.
Like stone a woman, like throwing pebbles at him. I got that.
So, it's crazy to think like Jesus didn't come to give more laws. He actually tried to turn people to the heart of the laws.
Right.
It's almost like the legalese of the Bible, where it's like, all the safety warnings on the power cord, to the toaster, like, hey, don't put this in water.
Right.
Don't put your curling iron in the bathtub.
Yeah.
Because people weren't getting it right. They were using it inappropriately. So over and over, the Jews are adding laws and regulations and behavioral modifications, and the heart is getting further and further away from the intended purpose. Jesus gets on the scene and he's like, hey, just like stop that. Let's reset, and it's gonna, by the way you love people. And we talked about that, I think, in the last 2 episodes. Like, loving people takes humility because it means you put them first.
Right.
Loving people means you set your pride and your ego aside because you're going to be concerned about them first. So even my desire to see, your path from your side of the table to the mug on the other end of the table is I have to stop being so concerned with my path towards the cup and become more concerned with your path towards the cup and how I can help you overcome those obstacles. That is really a core principle of Christianity, of loving your neighbor, loving the person across from the table. And again, that creates unity, that creates relationship, that is catch, not dodgeball, if you saw the last episode.
Yeah.
It's just, we have to, in order to really call ourselves Christians, adopt these principles, not these actions, because some denominations, some religions point to a list of things you have to do. You
do
have
this to get that
you have to pray this specific prayer
at this time
in order to be saved. In order to not be separated from God in the afterlife, you have to pray this specific prayer as if it's a magic spell. Disembodied Nick.
Are you hacking off limbs?
Oh, am I hacking off limbs?
Right.
No, that's actually good because we talked about that already.
Yes.
That
excluding other people that don't believe.
Excluding people. I'm not bashing from the standpoint of saying like, hey, praying the sinner's prayer, if that's how you grew up, like I had to pray this prayer in order to receive salvation.
Right.
Or, hey, I'm out doing street ministry. Hey, do you want to go to heaven and not hell?
Right.
Oh,
Say
yeah,
this after
yeah.
me.
Say this.
Yeah.
Oh, we saved this soul.
Yeah.
Because, and the reason why I bring that up, because there are a lot of people who grew up believing I have to pray this prayer in this manner. Now, I don't believe that's the case. I didn't write the Bible. I'm not perfect. This is what I believe. And what I believe is that Jesus is more concerned with the heart posture and the heart actions than the words that come out of your mouth, because Jesus even says, not all who come to me and say, Lord, Lord,
will be
allowed in.
Okay.
Not, didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we cast out demons in your name? And his response, I never knew you.
Yeah. So, okay, let's bring it on back into where we were.
I think I was on a soapbox there for a minute.
You definitely got over there a little bit. So, in the Bible, we're trying to look to Jesus as our wayward point. Who did he say he was, right? How did he say that? And we had a couple of different things. I am the bread of life. That's a little rabbit hole. What does that mean? Like, you have to eat my flesh? No, that's not what I mean. Again, it's Jesus speaking in his parables and stuff. I am the light of the world, and I am the door of the sheep. I'm the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life, the way, the truth, and the life, the true vine. Each one of those statements leads us in the same direction, right? He's the bread of life, and his blood, we're supposed to drink of it. So it's his teachings, not necessarily his physical flesh. It's, I am the true vine. Nobody, if we're detached from the vine, you can't produce good fruit. So I'm probably mixing a couple together there. Sorry.
Well, because even some of these phrases that he's using, he's doing intentionally, because again, he's speaking to a group of people in a time and a place that were waiting for a Messiah.
Right.
They were waiting for, and Messiah is this, Jews believed the anointed one, the one who would restore Israel, the people, not the place.
Right.
Some people believe the physical location as well.
Right.
But again, another rabbit hole. But to restore the kingdom of Israel and the people to a place of prominence and power that they were not living in at the time. So they're waiting for this Messiah to show up. Jesus is specifically using phrases that are going to direct their attention, because he'll make some statements and the immediate response from the religious elite is, that's blasphemy.
Yeah, blasphemer.
You like, they wanted to stone him, they wanted to kill him. And
You're equating yourself with God, yeah.
You think about it, like, this is a dude who shows up and he starts healing people.
Yeah.
People can see who were blind, people can walk who were lame, people who had leprosy and excommunicated from their communities.
Well, it comes to expectations, you know?
And it does, but like, you don't kill that dude, you wrap him in bubble wrap. You put 24-hour protection around him. Like, take care of this guy. I know he talks some crazy stuff, but he did in fact bring my son back to life, or my daughter back to life, or like, my kid can hear my voice now. Like, let's not mess with this dude.
Yeah, it's hard to put ourselves in that time and era, you know, to think about, and
because we know the end of the story.
Right, that's what's difficult for us. And the nation of Israel at that time, the people, as we say, was being oppressed by the Roman Empire. So all those people, even the religious leaders of that faith at the time, were still underneath of the thumb of the Roman Empire, and they could do their little practices and stuff as long as they conformed to those other things. And the common man at that time, you know, when they thought Messiah, it's like, we're taking over. We're going back to King David times.
Yeah, because Rome said, okay, that's fine, you can have your God, but I'm still Lord.
Right.
And Jesus came along and said, no, I'm Lord.
Yeah, and for the religious leaders at that time, you know, they were expecting the guy to come in on the white horse and the sword, and this guy from Nazareth comes strolling in with this ragtag bunch of followers and says he's it, and he just didn't fit the bill for them. And because of that, they killed him. And what we get to learn is that was the plan all along. You know, he died for our sins, for our salvation, and when we put our faith in him, we can have that salvation. But you know, I saw something like they were talking about, if you could go back in history, where would you go? Like, I'd go back and save Jesus from the cross. Like, no. No, why would you do that? You know, but it's our benefit of knowing the end of the story and being able to articulate it in a way that we can see, like, oh, those Pharisees, they just couldn't see it. But what they were doing was they were following their scrolls at the time, and they were looking for something where they had put these great expectations on this future figure that was going to come in there and save their nation state, right?
Well, let's get into a little bit more of I guess that, and how it again shifts. We can talk history all day long, but understanding really what it means to be a follower of those principles, and we'll get back into that in just a second. So we're talking about all, like, there's just 100 tangents in this episode, right?
Yeah.
And you know, so many of these tangents could be an episode all by themselves.
Right.
But again, I think to some degree that will take us down the hole of not, hey guys, here's something to chew on, but here I'm going to explain why I believe these things.
Right.
Which is not really the point of this podcast or what we're doing.
Right. We want them to be able to take our thoughts and roll them around for themselves.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So, and we were talking about this thought. Like, I think that there's two stumbling blocks to being able to accept or acknowledge that lordship of Jesus in your life.
Okay.
And one is this idea of, man, like, I struggle to believe. I have these doubts. And then the other is, well, yeah, but I shouldn't have to give up my side of the table just so you can have your side of the table.
Right. So,
and as we chewed on that, the reality is both of those are egocentric. They're self-driven.
Inward focused.
Because my doubts are greater than his abilities.
Right. I am the one person that he can't save.
Yeah, and that's a whole level of arrogance that we could go down that rabbit hole.
Right.
But my doubts are greater than his abilities that the Bible would argue he has.
Right.
Or that my rights and my desires are greater than what he's taught.
I think
and
that
what he's displayed.
That the second one, the first one, obviously, I think we can all fall into, but the second one, I think, is more of a cultural phenomenon in recent years. You know, my rights to what I believe. You know that this is what I believe, and you have to see it my way. You know I'm right, you're wrong, and you have to be wrong for me to be right. You know
Yeah, and we've talked about that a little bit.
Right, we did. And for us to be able to acknowledge that, yes, you have autonomy, but there's something greater, and if you're not living for something greater, you know, the Job, like, were you there when I created the thing? You know, were you there? Oh, you were there when I put the sun in motion and I put the moon in motion? Oh, you were there when you know, and until one of us can say that we were standing there next to him, then we need to recognize that we don't have that total autonomy. We need that belief in something greater. You had hit on that earlier, that the agnosticism guy you were talking about. You know, it all leads to a higher power, and more, you know, Matt Chandler talks about this almost weekly. Like, it's funny how more and more science is catching up to the Bible.
Yeah.
You know, it's this biblical text, this ancient text from 2,000 years ago. More and more often, science is proving it right.
Yeah,
not
like,
wrong.
this does matter.
Yeah,
this is important.
Oh, if you take a day off a week, then it actually does make your health better. You know?
Or recently there was the study. You know, we understood how fast the universe was expanding, and you know, as they looked out exponentially, and it's a lot of theoretical, you know, information
Jargon.
But they've discovered stars and systems out there that they're like, hey, actually, based on what we thought we believed, that shouldn't be there. Like, this is you can't, if it happened the way we thought it happened, that stuff shouldn't be there at the age that it clearly is. So now we don't know.
Just throw everything.
Yeah. So,
even some of the, I'm going to say all of them, don't want to classify, but there's those theoretical physicists and stuff like that as they're tracing, which I don't understand how they can look through a telescope and look back in time. That gets me. But they say it all kind of comes down to this, like you say, that it's ever expanding. It all started with the Big Bang theory, right? The Big Bang.
So when nothing became something out of nothing.
Right. It created itself, right? You mean like someone spoke it into existence? Yeah.
Wow.
That's weird. But that whole world gets me. You know, you listen to those guys talking theoretical physics and stuff is just crazy. But
because that's that whole train of thought of doubt.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, like to the nth degree.
Struggling. And I think the other part, or one of the problems with it, is people think in order for me to say, okay, Jesus is my Lord, I have to believe it all fully,
right,
and be able to argue for it, and I don't know what to do with dinosaurs.
So it's okay to just say I don't know?
It is okay to say I don't know. And again, you know, we're talking about some of the modern theologians, and none of us are going to get this right. But a guy that I think has done a pretty good job of getting a lot of things right, Tim Keller, who we recently lost.
Yes.
He talks about doubt like this. Like, when you're struggling with doubt, he says, weak faith in a strong branch is far superior to strong faith in a weak branch.
Right. So what do we believe in?
If you're hanging from a tree branch off a cliff, like, do you want to have a really, really strong grip on a rotten branch?
Right, on that 2-inch.
Or are you okay with the opposite?
Right.
That the branch is rock solid.
Right.
And man, I'm just...
all my effort isn't going to break it. Yeah.
Yeah, like I believe
Right.
more in that branch than I do in my own grip, but that's what's actually going to save me. Because my own efforts, if I had superhuman grip, but the branch was never strong enough, the branch will eventually break.
Yeah.
And what I like knowing is, I could fail in all of this, but that tree branch is never gonna break.
Right. It's that old picture. My mom used to have it on the thing, the footprints, right? There's the 2 footprints walking, and then it turns into one, and it's like, Jesus, you were walking with me, and then this is when you left me, and he's like, no, that's when I carried you. You know, so.
Well, the additional one that's been added to it, there's a portion of the sand that has drag marks.
That's me.
It's like,
kicking and screaming.
What happened over there? Yeah, that's when I dragged you kicking and screaming. Like,
right.
Because that's probably more. Yeah,
Right.
There are times where he carried me.
Right.
But there's also a lot of times where he's like,
Right. Yeah. So we've kind of landed on what is Christianity not, right? We've kind of drilled into as best as we possibly can without, like you say.
Yeah, not just Christianity, but the community of Christians.
Right.
So if we're saying what is, because the two almost become synonymous,
Right.
church and Christianity.
Yes, big C church.
In our, common language in the Western church, in our typical vernacular, so to speak.
Right.
And in our typical vernacular, no one uses the word vernacular, which I think is a shame, personally.
It's a great word.
Because I'm a nerd.
Right. Nerd.
Why did I hear that in Homer Simpson's voice?
I don't know. So and in today's times, a lot of people communicate through social media. We put our stuff out there, and you actually found a pastor. Is she a pastor or just
I
an
don't
author?
know the answer to that.
Amy Hayhurst, and she kind of had a really good what church is not.
What it's not, what it was never intended to be.
Right. That we kind of grabbed like that post and kind of put it here, and it's like, and this is really good ways that we consistently get it wrong. Church is not supposed to be a place to bring you entertainment.
Right.
How many times do people switch churches or something along those lines because it wasn't doing it for me.
I didn't like the music.
Right.
It's too loud.
It's not loud enough.
They use drums there.
Right. Yeah.
And again, this is not to bash a certain group.
Right.
This is to point out where we,
look
as
introspectively,
the members
Absolutely.
of that community.
Yep.
If I've gone to multiple churches in my 50 years of life. It's a long time. Big number.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't die. And I digress. But I have been a community member, a member of a community, really 3 different times, 3 different churches. The one I grew up in, well, why did you leave there? Well, I moved. I went in the military, I moved. Now, that led to me not being a part of a community, but then you rewind 18, 19 years ago, I found myself to be a member of a community. And what I would say there is after about 13 years, I became a member of the community I'm in now. Okay, well, why did you move? Okay, that's a way too long of a story.
Weak faith.
Definitely not weak faith.
The branch wasn't strong enough.
Actually, no. It was some very. It felt weak and small. The faith to follow God out of a community, to feel like I had reached the end of a sidewalk.
Yeah.
And him saying, "Just trust me."
Yeah.
And to step out into unknown, which led me to a community that has caused me to do things, lead things, be a part of things, to help grow community, and in my own way to strengthen that faith that felt so weak when I took that first step. Has grown me to a point where God calling me to take different steps in my life right now that I wouldn't have thought I was going to have to take.
Right.
But I can take those steps way more confidently than I took this one.
Right.
So
you didn't leave that community for your own personal needs.
No, I didn't want to.
Right.
That's the thing. Like,
right.
So it's not about the entertainment. It's about getting closer to God. How do we get closer to a God we can't see, touch, taste, smell, hear? Well, you love what He loves.
Right.
So,
how do you find out what that is? You got to spend time with Him.
And so you love what He loves. Well, what does He love? He loves people.
Yeah.
Because he made them.
What if you don't like people?
Well,
that's where I fall into.
They're very people-y. So, but yeah, so it was never a place for entertainment. It was never intended to be a place for entertainment. It was a place for community.
Community, absolutely.
So to move has to do with moving community, not moving because you don't like their light system or lack of light system.
Or lack of light system, right?
So next, Amanda points out that church was never meant to be a place that makes you feel better about yourself, but challenges you to be holy and reflect God's character.
I think that is a great analogy for some people as to why they might drift away from a church, because that pastor might hit on some things and really point the finger back into them, and their sense of self is greater than their sense of God. And
that's a great way to say that. Sense of self is bigger than their sense of God.
Yeah, and
that's good.
Thanks, man. But more often than not, I walk out of church. I always feel good, but there's always that like, oh man, he really put his thumb on something there. We
Ouch, quit it.
Ouch. Yeah, we hit on the 2 Timothy from this weekend, and all those listed of 18 different things that when you really start looking at it, you're like, man, that's how far short I am. Yeah, it's a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And you can look back and go, wow, I've come a long way. And then you look forward and go, whew, I got a long way to go still. So.
Well, and we see that modeled in Scripture, where you got Paul, who's literally responsible for the bulk of the New Testament, right?
Yeah.
Who says, what a wretched man I am.
Yeah.
Like, this is a guy who's literally walking around the Middle East, planting churches, getting beaten, stoned, thrown in prisons.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I'm horrible.
Yeah.
I am horrible.
Right.
Because I'm no longer looking through the Bible as the window.
Yeah.
And going, well, at least I ain't bad.
Yeah.
I may not be perfect. I may not be perfect, but I ain't that guy.
Yeah. Good for you.
Where Paul is going, he's using the mirror, so he is still comparing himself, but to perfection. To God.
Yeah.
And
that should be our only comparison.
Yeah. The closer you grow in your faith, honestly, the lesser you will think of yourself. Not in a false humility, like, oh, I'm such a horrible person.
No.
But like, man, I still fall short of what I'm called to do.
Daily, yeah. It is a daily realization. Yeah. Is kind of the best way I would say it.
And it's a benchmark to try to hit.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
Where's your bar?
Line my best up against perfection, I'm still going to fall short.
Way short.
But rather than like what society does of, I'm going to base my best day against your worst day.
Right.
I'm going to look at what is a positional heart? What is what is my worst day compared to perfection?
Right.
And that's where God's going to help me.
Yeah. Agreed. So another one of the 8 things church is not supposed to be by Amanda Hayhurst was somewhere you pretend to be perfect, but it's not supposed to be somewhere you pretend to be perfect, but somewhere you bring your brokenness in the midst of authentic community.
Say that one more time.
For the people in the back.
That's a good one, man. Church is not supposed to be somewhere you pretend to be perfect, but somewhere you bring your brokenness in the midst of authentic community. And that the authentic community is kind of the sticking point for me. I had my life changed like 13 years ago, 14 years ago, when I did the quest for authentic manhood. And prior to that, I grew up, I didn't have a father in my house. I didn't have a consistent male role model all through my teens and led me down a darker path. I didn't have a clear definition of what a man was, and then when I learned that, and through, it's like a 26-week study, that word authentic to me means something. That is a word that is, it's a sticking point for me. So when you find authentic community, and they allow you to bring your brokenness and not try to fix you, but walk with you. You used that analogy last week, like, I'll walk with you through the storm, but I'm not going to stand in the rain, which was great. And I think that when you can stop pretending to be somebody you're not, open your heart, and others receive that, that's authentic community. When you can just be like, bear it all and not worry about the way that they're going to look at you when you allow them in.
Well, and knowing a lot of your story, like I do, it's interesting. And I know Quest was a huge part of your journey to really grow into, who God's calling you to be.
Absolutely.
But what I also know is it was authentic community, an authentic relationship that even got you to the point where you would have gone to that.
True.
That got you in the door.
Yeah.
Because we know the same guy.
Yeah.
We know the same guy.
Yeah.
And shout out to Harold. Is
Absolutely.
Is the his authentic caring for you.
Yes.
Above what your relationship was. He was your landlord.
He was my landlord.
He was your landlord.
He's so much more than that
He
now.
cared so much about you.
The person me.
The person you, about you.
Yeah.
And that he was for you and supported you long before you even knew what that meant. That brought you to a community.
Yeah.
And in that community, you started to grow to a point where you, one of the most introverted guys I know, would put yourself out and went to somebody else's house.
Went to another church. We actually did it at a separate church location. We were at Riverside for that.
That's right.
Yeah. So
you went through that with guys you didn't know on week one, and bared your soul, let them bear theirs, iron sharpening iron, and exponentially grew in your faith from that. So again, talking about authentic community and being willing to show your imperfections, but at the same time, now you're in this place where you are herald to other people.
Trying to foster that authentic community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And what it leads me to think is, I feel like, and maybe it's just my radar, but you can kind of see those pretenders.
Back to that poser Christianity.
Poser Christianity. I think and maybe it's not like on the Saturday or the Sunday coming and going from church, but once you get into that small group setting, and it's, Rogan talks about having conversations with people. Like, you can keep up a front for a 10-minute interview, political, whatever, but you really get to know somebody. You sit down and talk to them for 3 hours, nonstop, and you find out when the rubber hits the road, and
your heart's going to get exposed.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to expose those poser Christians.
But what I think is you start saying poser Christian, you're like, oh, he goes to church on Sunday, but I saw him on Friday night. He is at the axe throwing place, and he had a beer, and he was loud and obnoxious and all that.
But he hit the bullseye.
So it's like, is that what I'm talking about, poser Christianity? No. In that 3-hour conversation, and we get past the hey man, how you doing? Oh man, everything's good. I'm blessed, highly favored.
Yeah.
You just
Blessed to be a blessing.
Trusting in the Lord. It's tough. But the more you talk, what you see is like, oh no. Like here, my coffee mug analogy. So many times I hold a coffee mug in my hand. It's like, no. Ben, I believe that if I hand this mug to you, that you'll bring it back.
Right.
Because I want what's inside.
Right.
And you're like, no, man, just trust me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I still have half a cup of coffee in here.
Right.
I can see it. I can taste it. I can smell it. I've got half a cup of coffee here.
Right.
So no. I'm going to hold my coffee.
Yeah.
No, man. If you trust me, I actually have something better.
I can put something.
I know this is lukewarm coffee, and it was really hot and fresh an hour ago, but now but I don't want to let it go. Just trust me.
Right.
Trust me. And really what you have for me is a whole carafe of coffee over there that is hot and it's fresh, and you want to give me something greater, something more, but I won't let go of what I already have. And that is probably another description of Christianity and actually accepting the Lordship of Christ, that he wants something so much more, but we are not willing to release what we're holding on to.
Yeah, that's good, man. And that's that doubt,
Yeah. So the weak faith is, okay, man, I'm going to let it go.
Right.
It may mean that I don't have coffee for the rest of this episode.
Right.
But
don't worry, Dave. We'll make sure you have coffee. But thank you. Look,
I told you there was half a cup. I was good. It was an analogy. Nick's getting me coffee.
Yeah.
He's a good Nick.
He's a good Nick.
He's a good Nick.
Right.
That's some authentic community right there.
Right. So bringing it back, reel it in. So the next one that she had was,
and we're jumping around here.
Yeah, we are. There's a couple
Thank you, my
that
friend.
I don't think are proper to start discussing now.
Oh, you mean the political platform one?
Yeah, you noticed I skipped over that one.
I did notice. Because blankly we can say it is not a political platform. Why can we say that? Because Jesus was born into a political time, and he, not just for the sake of being confrontational or antagonistic, he was against politics and for his father. And what I would say is, you go even back into the Old Testament, the nation of Israel said, hey, we want a king.
Yeah.
And God's like, you don't want a king.
No, you don't.
You don't want to do this.
We want to be like everybody else. Like, no, you don't. You really don't.
So it wasn't supposed to be political, because politics are a man-made institution. So they're always going to fall short of the glory of God.
Absolutely. And I'm glad we skipped over that.
And I think we can leave it there. There's a whole episode there that undoubtedly will cause us to lose some followers.
Yeah.
But I'm okay with that. I'm not looking for followers. I'm looking for Jesus.
That's a nice soundbite. So
I digress. Let's go back to the list.
Just
Amanda Hayhurst, Instagram, author and Bible teacher.
Yeah, she's says something about it's not a checkbox on the weekend. It's a way of life that transforms you and the world around you. And we talked about giving up that cup of coffee or whatever it is, parts of life. But what I've noticed in my personal journey is that there's things that were attractive to me prior to becoming a Christian, prior to really wholeheartedly following Christ, that are no longer attractive to me.
I like that you say it like that, because it's not that you don't do some things that you used to do.
Right.
They're just not even attractive anymore.
Exactly. And there's things now that are.
lifestyle, just to even think about it, it's like, oh.
Yeah, that just doesn't, me and my wife talk about it, like, like going out to the club or going drinking or something like that. And like, gosh, I get exhausted just thinking it doesn't start till 11. What?
Okay, some of that has to do with the gray and the beard, my friend.
I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that. But, you know, it's just that thought like, gosh, you used to do this and enjoy it. And now that's not even on the scope of
You know, but I
ideas.
even wonder then, like, how much did we really enjoy some of the places we went and the things that we did, and how much did we do it because we were filling a hole?
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, there was definitely, we were searching for something, and we were trying to fill it by
With whatever we could grab.
people's way, human way, flesh,
Yeah.
the worldly way.
Yeah.
You know, and
The relationships and the actions and the activities
Yeah.
that we took part in now are exposed before us as something not even just lesser, but detrimental
Yeah.
to who I'm trying to become.
Exactly, and I think that we can look back at those things that we may not find attractive now, and look at the new things that we do find attractive, and compare and contrast what kind of a life they bring to us, what kind of a life they bring to our surrounding people, and even look at the people that we probably don't associate with anymore because of the life changes, the transformation that we've went through in that, and look at, you know, there's that saying, you're the sum of the 5 closest people to you, you know, and the people that I try to surround myself with now only want the best for me, only want to lift me up, you know, and you talked about Harold, and that relationship is totally God, all the way, and I'll never have a doubt with that. That man is still, you know, such a good person, such a good, genuinely kind, loving man. And the guy that he met, the guy in 2007 that started renting from him, had no business being in his life. You know, and he has kind of told the thing, like, when I met him the very first time and we talked about renting the house, and he said, I went back to Joe, his wife, and said, well, he's a little rough looking, but I think he'll be a good, you know.
But that's how he sees people.
Yeah.
That's how he sees people.
But that's the kind of people I try to surround myself with now, you know. And at that time, I didn't even know it. And maybe he was the first one to help to usher me into this life transformation that I continue to walk in every day, you know. And I continue now. I don't want to say I'm on the other side of it, because I'm constantly growing, but I've become kind of an ambassador is not the right word. Like, I'm trying to foster that community. I'm trying to foster those relationships with other people. You know, I'm not the best at it. You know, my introvertedness really gets me in a pickle sometimes. You know, right now, as we're talking, there's 3 of us in this room, and this is awesome. You know, I might be talking to 30 people, but you know, it's not like, you know, our Tuesday night men's group. There's 300 guys in the room, and I have no desire to stand up on stage and discuss this stuff. You know, I maybe you could coax me into it one time, but that's not life-giving to me. However, if I could take 5 of those guys at a time and we could all sit down and do an episode together, I think that we could really have some great conversations. But for me to try and talk to a whole crowd of people, that's just not me. And that's what I mean by my introvertedness.
Right,
can be detrimental.
But we are gifted differently for different purposes.
Yeah.
Which honestly, like, so we look at this last one, and again, we jumped around a little bit.
Pinky toe knuckle.
The church was never, it was not supposed to be just a building, but a body of believers living out God's mission and carrying the gospel into the world.
A body.
A body, a whole body.
Yeah.
So church is not a place, it's a people. Mm-hmm. And it's, as a result, we are gifted differently for different purposes. And
True.
You know, Scripture points to that. Like, hey, the ear doesn't say to the eye that it's lesser because you can't hear, and the eye doesn't say to the mouth that you can't see. But collectively,
Right.
we are a body accomplishing a goal. So we have different giftings. there are, and not everybody knows me, but I'm a little more extroverted than you.
Just a little
at
bit.
times. But now that I'm getting older, it's like there's a lot of people there.
Right.
I'm gonna take a pass. No, but as a result, like you and I are gifted very differently in our tendencies and traits and what we would call our skills. Like you are a details guy. You see stuff like as we started in men's ministry and stuff like that together, like one of the greatest gifts to me was the fact that you saw things so differently than I did.
Yeah, we've talked about that too.
And that's the great thing.
Dave's a big picture guy.
I'm a big picture guy, and I'm also and it could be occupational.
Right.
Like, hey, whatever comes,
We'll figure it out.
You know, I am all about making a decision, even if it's the wrong decision,
Right.
because I can change that decision. Like I can walk this direction 5 steps. Oh, you want me to go? All right, yeah. I'm only 5 steps behind. Whatever, I can make that up.
Right.
So, but you're more the let's hang on a second
Right,
and figure out which direction we're going to go first.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to try 3 directions, and none of those work. So now I know direction 4 is the one.
So the body, we're the body, and one of my personal struggles is, we talk about the eye. I'm not the ear. I'm not the toe. I'm not the. Any of those body parts ever go? I don't really like that other body part. Like we're all supposed to love each other. We love your neighbor, but do you have to like them too? Is there a difference?
Well,
how can we move through that?
The Bible talks about it. But
And maybe that's a me thing,
a common phrase that you hear non-church people use: "Don't cut off your nose to spite your face."
Right.
Is a biblical principle.
Right.
Like
And I'm not saying excommunicate them from the church. I'm just saying, as the pinky toe knuckle, do I have to associate with the thumb?
well, that's the thing. You don't have to, and
Right.
we talked about it in the last episode.
Yeah.
And if you didn't see it, you should go back and look at that, because it's this whole idea of unity. We can be a unified body
And disagree.
and disagree and not spend time together. Loving and enjoying are 2 totally different things.
True.
I enjoy your company. We hang out. We work out together.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. when the moons align, whatever.
Right.
Our families spend time together.
Yes.
When we're both at the same church service, we sit together. So we enjoy each other's company. There are people that I love deeply that I don't hang out with.
That's a good
Because
way to put it.
I can love them for who they are, who God made them to be. I can even enjoy the effect they have on my life and ministry and things like that without going, man, I just want to hang out with you on a Saturday. and sometimes it's as simple as like, hey, Saturday, college football season, I'm gonna watch some football, guys.
Right.
And you don't enjoy football.
Yeah.
We are not going to hang out
Right.
during football season.
I'm just trying to give people a perspective, permission, to not feel the obligation, for the sake of religion, to put themselves in an inauthentic relationship just because they feel like that's what they are supposed to do, or that's what they have to do. As a Christian, I'm supposed to love everybody. Well,
You love everybody, but it doesn't mean you have to hang out with them.
Right.
Although, Ben,
Sir,
your pinky toe knuckle,
this guy got his shoes off.
I literally,
lot of benefit from the thumb.
Yeah.
that is,
Nick has his shoe off now, pointing out his pinky toe knuckle.
And how it works with the thumb.
Right.
wow.
And if you don't get the analogy, I always pick the most obscure body part to be, because it might be false humility. It's just how I think.
None of what just happened is in our notes. Let me,
But yeah, I don't see that
Like-
anywhere. All right.
like-
So
wow.
so
So we'll put that whole list in the show notes.
yeah,
Because
really good.
it's good.
It was.
Especially and what I would say is, you're going to look at this, and one or two of these, you're going to be like, yeah, yeah. And then one or two of these might be like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And what I would challenge is
Mirror, not a window.
the mirror, not a window. What do you mean? Why does that grate against you? Why are you standing on a platform of an identity, and that statement came and shook the
what was it about that?
The table leg that you're standing on. You know, is that the coffee mug that you're holding a little too tight to?
A little too tight, yeah.
Like, no, it's not that. I just, sure, you can quit anytime you like. I get it.
Sure you can.
Sure you can. No, I totally believe you.
Right.
So, yeah, Christianity, church, it is a lot of things, but it's also not a lot of things.
It is definitely not a lot of things.
But I think in our time, in our culture, in our society, that, well, I shouldn't have to give this up, or I don't believe enough. I just think it comes back to self.
Yeah.
I think it comes back to self, because you have to have faith
Yes.
that these things that you don't think you should have to give up, that you have to have
Something
faith
better.
that there's something greater beyond that.
Right. Or that those things are actually detrimental to you in some way, shape, or form. So we'll wrap it up here, and we like to try and leave people with something to chew on. You know,
I feel like there's a whole pack of gum here. Like this isn't. We didn't leave you with a stick of gum.
Right,
This week.
and we're not saying this is definitively what Christianity is, or being a Christian is. This is our experience. This is kind of what we believe. There are some truths in there. There are some hyperboles in there, but that's kind of what we do.
There's also Nick's bare feet.
Nick's bare feet. First. There's a first. Matt Chandler, a pastor out of Texas, as the podcast started in Texas. Not this episode. Or
way to circle that back
circling
around.
it all the way back around. I listen to them regularly. Every week their message comes out on like Monday or Tuesday. I listen to it on my drive to work on Wednesdays. And a few years ago, he had this great quote, and I wrote it down, and it really hit it for me. And he was like talking about giving your life to Jesus and leading that way. And he says, if you're tired of life lurching from one partial satisfaction to another, only interrupted by ditches of disappointment, then the life of a Christian is for you, giving your life to Jesus.
Ditches of disappointment.
Lurching from one partial satisfaction. And if you think about that in itself, like a partial satisfaction, like, I got a new car, 3 weeks later, or the first car payment's due. Crap, that car's not as awesome as I thought it was.
Or you get a new car and literally the next day you get a flat tire. You remember that?
I do.
33 miles on my car, flat tire.
What are you doing on the side of the road, Dave?
Nothing like the world making you curse the blessing that you were rejoicing.
Yeah, and
in a ditch of disappointment.
In a ditch of disappointment. So that stuck with me so much. And he's a speaking pastor, so he articulates it way better than me, but those lurching.
Is that a pinky toe disclaimer you just gave?
There it is. Yeah.
He does it better than me.
Yeah.
Okay. But go ahead.
Absolutely. Come on.
I'm not trying to highlight your self-diminishing nature. But
Anyway.
Go on. I digress. You digress.
Digress. We will digress. I just the words that he used, the phrasing, those, and words have meanings and everything. We talked about that as well, and thinking about partial satisfactions and ultimate realities, and how being a Christian, giving your faith in God, isn't going to lead to perfection the whole way, but it is going to lead to something greater than yourself.
Absolutely. So, to put a bow on it, I don't think I could say it any better, which makes me the pinky toe, because you said it so well.
This guy.
But before we go, I just want to again say thanks for jumping in and getting involved. Likes, comments, shares. whether it's even the short snippets that Disembodied Nick throws on to
Yes.
YouTube every day.
Check it
Just
out. Share it.
Check it out, share it, post it somewhere. But like, subscribe, all of those things. If you like an audio version, make sure you check out Amazon, Spotify, Apple, SoundCloud, any of those. But also, we want to add value to your world. We want to be able to speak to and maybe help you chew on a topic. So throw some comments out there.
There's some topics out there for us.
And we will
Yeah.
we'll go down those tangents.
Absolutely.
So
For Nick, Dave, I'm Ben. There's something to chew on.
This has been a presentation of Something to Chew On, a production of Rev 21 Media LC, created by the three amigos, Ben Garcia, Dave Drum, and Nick Smiloff. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep chewing on the good stuff.